Galveston is an island steeped in tragedy, battered by storms, ravaged by war, and shadowed by pestilence. Beneath its elegant Victorian charm lies something far more haunting, a history whispered through creaking floorboards, flickering lights, and footsteps in the dead of night. Most old cities have ghosts, but Galveston doesn't hide hers. She wears them like a veil, often called a cemetery with a beach attached. This is a place where the past clings tightly to the present. And we came to witness what still lingers. Paranormal investigators and ghost hunters captured these images, each one claiming to have seen or felt something they could not explain. What you are seeing is presented exactly as it was shared with us, unaltered and unfiltered. Are they tricks of the light, or proof that something refuses to be forgotten?
My name is Jenna Keel, and my background is I'm a professional tour guide here in Galveston, Texas. I've been performing as a tour guide for about 10 years and doing research as a historian for about the same amount of time. I grew up in a haunted house, so seeing weird things and having supernatural experiences was kind of a second nature deal at my house. And it just fascinated me that there could be something on the other side and you could have these experiences and see things. And it just kind of led me into learning about the different ghost stories. But when the ghost stories would scare me, then I would have to look deeper into the history. That was kind of the deal at my house. My parents would say, yeah, it scares you because you don't know why it's here. So if you understand the why, then you will understand how to deal with it better. And that's kind of what we've always done.
Among Galveston's grand historic homes, the League-Kempner Mansion stands as a monument to wealth, tragedy, and time itself. Built in 1893, it's known as one of the last of the legendary Broadway beauties.
This is the League-Kempner Mansion. And the League-Kempner Mansion, it started out being built by Nicholas Clayton, who was a famed architect here in Galveston. And this is the very last residential establishment that he built. And he built it for his very good friend, J.C. League. And they had a really interesting history because J.C. League was a businessman and he winds up being the man that donates the land that creates League City, which is back over on the mainland, of course. Well, Nicholas Clayton had designed a building for the county of Galveston here in the city, and he had a couple of issues with them, and he wound up being blackballed. And he just about wound up penniless at the end of it. He winds up bankrolling Nicholas Clayton for pretty much the rest of his life. And J.C. League passes away in January of 1916, and Nicholas Clayton dies in December of 1916. And when he built this house and designed it, he was keeping his friendship in mind the whole time. And all of the latest, greatest appliances, all of the different types of electrical opportunities there were to wire this house for lighting, he took all of that into consideration. And it was really a house forged in friendship.
This elegant residence has weathered hurricanes, witnessed shifting fortunes, and endured through generations of change. But beyond its hardwood floors and sweeping porches, something lingers. Whispers echo through the halls. Visitors report shadowed figures drifting through dim corridors, doors closing without a touch, and the faint scent of perfume in an empty room. Some say this mansion is more than just a home. It's a keeper of memories and spirits.
I believe that there's a lot of activity in the house because every person who has ever lived here has loved this house just unconditionally. The first owners, of course, the house was built because the best friend makes the house for him, right? And then when the League family sells it to the Kempner family, Eliza Kempner, she wants to have this house so that her grandchildren can visit her here and they can have holidays here. And they wind up using this house as a way to entertain for their family and the community at the same time. Beyond that, when the third owner takes it over, it becomes a boarding house. So it becomes a place for people to live who choose to come to the island. And when that person passed away, unfortunately, the house had not been used for a long period of time. So it kind of fell into disrepair. The woman who purchased the house and then turned it into a nonprofit, Janie Mitchum, she winds up loving the house too. She had been looking at this house her entire life. Every time they would come to Galveston to go to the beach, she would pass by this house and just admired it. And when she was able to finally get the opportunity to buy it, she got inside and realized that a lot of the original architectural details are still here. That isn't just by accident. This house had been sitting vacant for about 20 years, and nobody who had ever come into the house, vandals, anyone, nobody had ever destroyed any of the things that were here, which is kind of remarkable when you think about vacant places and how people will go inside and do things to them. There have been a lot of paranormal investigations that have come through. And there was a group, Gen X Paranormal, and they were in the master bedroom and they were taking photographs and they got what appeared to be apparitions. There was also some cloudiness that showed up in the pictures. There were faces that showed up in those cloudy pieces of evidence that they had. One of the investigators looked as if he was wearing absolutely not a stitch of clothing, and yet he was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. It was very unusual. We've also had a paranormal investigation that took place where they had an entire group of people, about 25, 30 people lining the walls, and they had a flashlight sitting on a table, and they kept asking questions, and the flashlight would come on for yes, it would stay off for no. They continuously checked the batteries to make sure that it wasn't faulty. They also changed out the flashlights that they were using, and they kept getting the same type of responses. So there's a lot of energy in that space, and a lot of people do have experiences in there. When I met Janie for the very first time, I told her that I didn't know if I would be able to help her in any capacity to do anything for this house. But I definitely wanted to try, because this house, with its history, is worth saving. And so we created a month of mourning, and we did the psychic medium gallery reading night and paranormal investigations in order to be able to raise money for the house. In doing that, I had to decorate the parlor for a funeral. So I chose the inspiration of J.C. League's funeral, which was held in the parlor when he died. And we put the casket in there. We had flower arrangements. We had tables set up. We had the mirror in there covered. It was just like it would have been at the time of his passing. We had some final touches that we needed to do. So my sister and I were coming to the house to finish those up. And I have a key and the alarm code. I had to unlock the door, punch in the alarm code, wandered around the corner to the parlor, and there was a woman sitting at the table in one of the chairs. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize there was anybody in here." And then I went, "Wait, I am completely alone in this house. There shouldn't be anyone there." And she was gone. And that was the first time I ever saw someone in this house. On pretty much every ghost tour that I've done through the house, we've had people who are always most intrigued to go into the basement, because it's not often you get to see a basement level in the city of Galveston, and yet we have one. And on every tour, everybody always seems to see a man standing in the corner. Now, I've never seen him. I've never had any experiences with him, but numerous people on the tours have seen him down there. And we had a paranormal investigative team that came through, and they had two rules that they were told they needed to follow. They were not allowed to go to the attic, and they were not allowed to go to the basement alone. Those were the rules. And they chose to break the rules and go. One of the investigators wound up getting scratched. They were saying that through their spirit box, they were getting not nice words being said to them and being called, unpleasant things, and just really didn't like the experience at all. So they ran to the sunroom, And they said that they felt very peaceful in there, as if that was the only safe space that there was in the house. And when I got back to the house to talk to them and find out what was going on, they told me that they had gone in the basement. And I said, well, I had told you don't go in there, and you did. And the woman looked over at me and she said, yes, but when we went down there, these terrible things happened and I was scratched. And she did have scratches on her arm. I don't think that it was malicious, really. I think it was more a way to scare them because they knew that they had not listened and had not followed the rules. But again, people have had experiences and have seen things down there, so I really can't say for sure. In the attic space, there is a story of a couple of ladies who were touring through the house. And it was kind of a slow day, so one of the volunteers was walking them through and explaining what the different rooms were for and just, basically showing them the house as one does. And they saw a little girl that was up here and just assumed that she was the granddaughter of the person who was showing them around. And at the end of the tour, they were a little confused as to why they weren't able to tour the third floor space alone if there was a child that was running around up here. So they came back into the house and they said, hey, we just really want to know, if it's not safe on the third floor, why are you allowing your granddaughter to run around up there? And the volunteer looked at them and said, there are no children here today. You guys are the only ones that have come through. And they said, no, we saw her. She was on the third floor. She's in the attic space. And they came back up here and they said that she had ducked behind the wall as they were walking out. And they were the only ones so far that I know of that have seen her. But there is a lot of activity in the attic space regardless. People on tours oftentimes feel as if when they go close to the sink, as if they're being pushed out of the space. Sometimes people feel cold spots over there. So different things like that do occur. There is a room on the first floor. It would be a study or a library. And there's a portrait of J.C. League above the fireplace in that room. And it seems as though his eyes follow you as you move through the room, which is a little spooky all on its own. But during a paranormal investigation, after that one team didn't listen to the rules, it became the law of the land that we had to have a volunteer on site when the investigations would happen so that we could make sure that everybody was doing what they were supposed to. Sometimes that conflicts with my ghost tours. And so my sister will come and she will sit here with the people while I am doing the tour, and then I relieve her when I'm done. Just this last summer, it was exceptionally hot in the house. We do not have air conditioning in the Lee Kempner mansion. It is a work in progress, and it needs a lot of love before that can happen. And so she and her husband were sitting down in that room in the study, the library where J.C. League's portrait hangs. And she was sitting in the leather chair. And he was sitting across from her on a chair. He was sweating bullets. He was just drenched in sweat. My sister was cold and felt as if maybe possibly there was a presence located either in the chair where she was sitting or very near it. And she stayed chilled and remained chilled the entire time she was sitting in that location. My mom came in through the house after we did the month of mourning, and she was helping us gather our things and take things out of the house because we had to get ready for Christmas. And there was a room partition that was sitting next to that chair. My mom leaned over the chair to grab it, and when she did, she felt as if somebody stood up from the chair and walked through her.
Standing tall since 1895, the Hutchins and Seeley Building is a towering symbol of Galveston's Gilded Age, a time when cotton was king and fortunes rose and fell with the tide. Its grand neo-Renaissance design was no accident. Built to house a powerful banking empire, this building was meant to impress. It played a central role in Galveston's commercial legacy, standing watch as the city transformed with each passing generation.
I'm Pamela Stoddard. I'm a tour guide for Spooky Galveston. So the building we're currently in, the Hutchings-Seeley building, when it was first designed, Hutchings-Seeley was Hutchings-Seeley Ball, but Ball ended up deciding to leave the partnership partway through the construction of the building, so then they created the two buildings that we're actually now in, because the building itself is designed by Nicholas Clayton to look like it's one building, but there's actually two separate buildings to this. So you had the Hutchings side of it where he had his offices, and then you had Seeley's side where you had two brothers, George and John Seeley. Sorry. You had two brothers, George and John Seeley, who were the Seeleys of Hutchings Seeley that had the other side was theirs. Together, they ended up doing a lot of funding for different ventures within Texas. They helped out some of the railroad. Mostly, they were focused in banking and cotton. But as things progressed, and especially once you had Galveston hit the 1900s, they ended up doing a lot more with this community to end up building up quite the little empire for themselves. But during the 1900 storm, you had, the banks was still downstairs, but you had a lot of the upper floors here were living quarters. So you had people that were actually staying in here during the 1900 storm. And on that end, as far as the Seeley brothers went, they had their own houses. George Seeley and his wife Magnolia had their house Open Gates that after the storm would become a refuge for people, and also the headquarters for the Red Cross relief efforts during the 1900 storm. But the reason why you hear the name Seeley around here a lot is, even for people that don't know Hutchings Seeley, you will hear Seeley because you have UTMB, the University of Texas Medical Branch. They were actually already in existence back in 1900. They were a free clinic, and they were a free clinic up until Harvey, was when they ended up almost losing the entire building to where they ended up expanding off island as well as actually starting to charge for their services. But when the 1900 storm happened, both Seeleys ended up becoming very involved in also medical supplies and keeping medical facilities open, to the point where John Seeley left $40,000 when he died to go to UTMB. His brother and wife did much the same. A lot of their assets were also left to UTMB, and then when their grandson died, he was the last one to live in their house, and the house also became a part of UTMB. So you'll hear John and Jeannie Seeley a lot these days. They're referring to the cancer centers that are named after those two.
But history isn't only written in ledgers and contracts. Beneath the ornate ceilings and sweeping staircase are echoes of a different kind. Today, the building hosts 3 floors of bustling shops, and yet, employees speak of cold spots that appear from nowhere, of voices heard in empty rooms, of footsteps with no source, and the unsettling feeling of always being watched. Some say the business of the dead never sleeps, and in this building, the past is anything but silent.
I'm Tim Stoddard. Most of what I have experienced in here is not necessarily the ghost stories that everybody say, but just weird feelings. There is a mezzanine area on the second level here where there is a beautiful glass inlaid floor. I personally cannot get within 5 feet of it. I have wanted to climb up the stairs several times, and it always seems like there's something there telling me not to. Don't know why. And part of me doesn't want to know why. There's, of course, the area over here by the elevator that a lot of people have stated that the building feels like it's swaying. I myself have felt the building swaying. It's not a lot, but it's just enough to really get your attention. And then even further on in, where now the airbrush place is, I know that I have seen little shadows out of the corner of my eye, and I'm not one to always attribute it to the supernatural. There's sometimes an explanation, but this building definitely has some interesting things going on.
My name is Wendy Woodard. There's been a few experiences. Most recently, I've been in my shop painting, getting ready to open, and I usually come pretty early in the morning, around 8:15-ish. Usually I'm up here on the 3rd floor by myself, and I've heard like footsteps, just all kinds of noises like people would make. And I've been the only one on the floor. Also, the heat would be on in the building in the morning when I would come in, and there would often be cold breezes almost coming through while I've been in there painting. Then there's been a lot of things that have happened when I was actually working in my sister's shop. Just different things. I would be in the store and turn all the candles off in the store. And then the next day she would ask me if I left candles on. No, I turned them all off. I promise I did. So things like that would happen. My husband and myself had our family pictures done in Studio 23, and we were in here at about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and there were noises like on the second floor. You could hear noises in the hallway. Only other person in this building was the cleaning lady. She was on the first floor cleaning, and you can always feel something around you. You always feel like you're being watched, especially in the restroom on the second floor. My daughter and I were leaving the third floor one day. We were by the elevator, and my daughter felt something touch her. So it's just been things like that have happened.
So with the Hutchings-Seeley building, as mentioned, it was part of the 1900 storm. When the 1900 storm hit, a lot of the waves and surges came up to about 17 feet, to where they were up to the second floor of this building. When that happened, there was a story that there was a woman that was here. We have no record of what her name is. There are a lot of accounts of people having met her, had their grandparents and their parents be saved by her, but she was a woman that decided that she couldn't take the screams in the night anymore. Because when the storm hit, even though it started up when it was still light out, by the time it started getting to that 17-foot surge, it was completely dark out. And after hearing so much of the terror, she ended up opening a window, tying a rope to herself into a radiator, and jumping out the window into the storm. She grabbed the first thing that she felt like a person, and used the rope to pull them both back into the building. Once she'd done that, she jumped out again and continued to do this. After she had gotten some people saved into the building, they tried to discourage her from doing it again, but she wasn't going to let them dissuade her unless somebody else would take her place. So instead, they ended up manning the rope, and she pulled in more people. On one side of the room, she piled up basically the dead so that they could later be identified by their families. The other side of the room was all the people that were still alive, so they could try to help take care of each other. And then finally, as the storm surge started going down, she went down on the stairs and did the same. Like I said, unfortunately, we don't know her name. That was never recorded, but there are a lot of diary entries and first-hand accounts of being saved by the schoolmarm. And from the stories that we found, it was either a couple weeks or a couple months later, but she ended up dying of pneumonia. So she managed to live through the storm, but unfortunately, she didn't see much after. So with the schoolmarm, there are people that have said that they've seen her, both in the windows and on the staircase. It's a very common place for people to say that they've seen her, as well as people who've seen her walking past the windows. Other hauntings include there is a store downstairs called Tina's. Tina's has had some experiences with seeing what they thought was a little boy running around in there, and they've often found that there are things that are knocked on the floor when they get in the mornings and have to spend a little bit of the morning putting things back together. And then there is a art supply store next to the elevator. And both in the room of the art supply store as well as just in front of the elevator, there are several people that, if it is a breezy day, you can feel this building swaying. But if it's not a breezy day, there's some days that you can still feel it swaying as if it is. To where there's a lot of people that believe it's residual energy from the terror of that storm. So there is a space, there's an attic space, which is a little awkward to call it an attic space since it's not on top of the building, it's actually to the side a little bit. If you go up to the third floor, there's a back corner that's attic space at the moment. A lot of the different people that are using the building are able to use this as storage space. But when you go back into it, it's all very unfinished, looks like it's still very torn down. A lot of the refurbishing efforts haven't reached that far yet, and there's a staircase that goes to nothing. It's currently walled off, but there are people that do not like to go on that staircase because they say that they've seen a man on it. And a lot of people in general, once you get to about halfway to the staircase in that room, will start to feel uneasy.
Docked along Seawolf Park, the Galveston Naval Museum stands as a solemn tribute to those who served at sea, most notably the brave souls aboard the USS Stewart and the USS Kavala. These steel giants weathered the chaos of World War II, bearing witness to battles, sacrifice, and the lives of sailors who never came home. Now at rest, the ships sit in silence. But that silence doesn't always last. Visitors and staff have reported strange sounds echoing below deck. Footsteps in empty corridors, whispers in the stale air, and voices carried on the ocean wind. Some wonder if these vessels still hold the energy of the men who fought and died within their walls, if duty ever truly ends, or if some spirits still stand watch.
We are currently on Pelican Island, and we are at the Galveston Naval Museum. This museum was established in the 1970s, and it consists of 2 World War II vessels. So we have the USS Stewart and the USS Kavala. The Stewart is a carrier, and the Kavala is a submarine. This particular island, it has its own fair share of history, in that after the 1900 storm, a lot of the bodies washed up on the shores of this island. And this was where the immigration station had its hospital at that time as well. So you have a lot of paranormal activity and ghostly stories that get shared all the time about those particular things. People seeing, apparitions wandering along the water on the sides. But when you have 2 World War II vessels that both saw battle during World War II, to add to that, you get a lot more paranormal activity and hauntings, apparitions, things of that nature. Here on the Stewart, which is where we currently are, at one time there was a kamikaze plane that hit the vessel while it was out to sea. And when that happened, there was a gentleman who was out on the deck and he was decapitated. Then that plane careened into the side of the ship and it damaged the engine room and injured 30 men in the process. There are a lot of stories of apparitions being seen in the vessel itself. There is a story of a gentleman who runs the top deck. Apparently, while he was in service to the Navy, he was claustrophobic and also did not like being out to sea. So he would break out of the brig and he would run the top deck. They say he still does that now in his afterlife. There's a story of 2 boys who were cleaning their weapons below deck, and one of them was horsing around and accidentally shot the other, and his friend died. And they tried to save his life here in the wardroom where we currently are. This was where they would perform surgery operations here on this table. And the light above the table oftentimes turns itself off and on. We've had tours that have come through back to back where it's been on at one time, and then on another tour it would be off. And then during a tour just a couple of weeks ago, we had a situation where the light came on while the group was in here. Oftentimes, tour guides and people that tour the facilities in general will smell hospital smells, disinfectant, medical grade cleaners, things like that in this particular location. My tour guide, Tim, he has experience seeing apparitions standing just beyond that door. And it's a very common practice for these types of things to happen. Now, this particular vessel has all of these types of stories attached to it, that's true, but over on the Kavala, they have experiences as well. So you'll have the sensation of having cell phones sitting on one of the bunks, and literally it'll drop 5-10% in charge just sitting there on its own unprovoked. A lot of times you'll hear music being played in places where there shouldn't be any music playing. You'll hear people talking where there are no people to be talking. And just this huge sense of being in a space that is occupied. Specifically over in the Kavala, you'll experience that where they have all of their equipment for communications. it's almost as if some people are still trying to communicate from the other side.
Hello, my name is Reese Young, and I am an employee for the Galveston Naval Museum. I have been a member here for about a year, almost a half. And when we first started doing paranormal tours the year before we invited Spooky Galveston, we just did it out of fun. My other teammate and I, they contacted us to ask about doing the tours. And so from there, we came together, made a nice business plan, and they started taking over what we didn't have the staff to actually do ourselves. So it gave us a really cool opportunity. And as I started talking with them more, I always told them I never really believed in the paranormal. I said, I'm too ADHD, there's too many things, I'm completely inattentive, it goes all over the place. I said, I can guarantee you they're probably more like, that woman never sees anything we do. So I ended up having situations shortly after, because Jen did warn me. She goes, you'll end up where they'll prove you things are going to happen. And the first one started in the infirmary. I sleep in the back room where we keep a lot of our archives during sleepovers. We have scouts and everything that come in. And the first night I was sleeping, I had turned off all the lights and unplugged as much as I could. And there are two white flashing little orbs over the desk. That used to be the desk for the ship's doctor. And at first I was always thinking, okay, well, it's got to be something coming off of the monitor. You know, there has to be something causing this light. Maybe there's one of our white bags. And the next morning when I got up, it ended up, the monitor was unplugged. There was no computer system. There was nothing there to cause those little white orbs that I kept seeing floating over the desk. The second thing happened actually just last weekend during another scout sleepover. And typically I will set 2 alarm clocks, one for 6:30 so I can go out and peek out on everybody, and then 7 to go out and do the official waking. And this morning, because my group was a bunch of little 6-year-old kids, I didn't feel the need to wake up at 6:30, just grab them at 7. And all of a sudden the light and once again, the doctor's office just automatically clipped on. And it was one of our big, heavy lights that you have to turn the knob, the dial. And it came on right at the time my alarm would usually go off. So I've come to think that we do have spirits. They are kind of here. They, they know you work hard for the place, they're going to help you maintain it. So I guess I lucked out and ended up getting some great spooky spirits. But what I always believed really was haunting about this place is if you talk to any war vets or any troop men that served active, they will tell you they always leave the part of themselves in the battle. And what I feel gets played throughout here is that part of them that never returned home. You can talk to all of your Pearl Harbor, your Vietnams, and they always say there's something of them left behind. And that is why so many things play out automatically. I don't know if Jen told you about the 2 young officers. One of them accidentally shot his friend in this room. Well, when we first started doing our spooky tours in here, the light started flipping off and on, and it hadn't worked the entire time I had been here. And suddenly it is instantly getting power and generating back up. Just the normal things like that. The Kabbalah is our more active haunting. We always call this one passive and the Kabbalah to be a more active. The men in there, if you're talking about submariners versus men who served on the ship, the submariners knew they had a less likely chance of survival. And in order to serve on a submarine, you had to have a particular sense of humor and be a particular type of person. And we have bunks in there that are haunted, even though they had to practice what was hot bunking. The one where we have the George officer, which is the youngest enlisted officer in training, people kept getting poked. They would have their batteries drained from their phone. As you start walking into the engine room, we tried doing some of our own little paranormal readings for the first, and staff members have been grabbed. They've been poked. We've had tours that we've gone through where a lady swore she could hear her name being called by her husband. And when she turned around, there was no one behind her, and her husband was all the way at the front. So it calls to people. We're not sure why or who they choose to interact with. We find that some staff they tend to like more than others. We had our ship superintendent at one point in time almost got shoved off the vessel when he was young. So we figured they really felt like playing with him. And the Kavala, it saw a lot more action in the way of fighting than the Stuart did. The Stuart was more of a rescue vessel. It was an escort. It took a lot of firepower on, but it was used more for fire and fire brigades mostly. And then eventually at the end of the war, when they had D-Day, she ended up moving over into the Pacific, where you heard some of the other stories from Jen. But the one that was the more active hunter was always the Kavala. And that's one that when you think of how much you have to serve, when you're trying to quickly outmaneuver a torpedo or something, that is definitely going to stay in you. You know, Maya Angelou always commented that she believed one day we'll be able to measure the power of words. And if you think of all the words and the commands and the emotions that go into that place, it's going to be haunted. And that's not even mentioning the ground. Do you know anything about the island itself? So this island back in the 1800s did not exist. It was just a small little strip of marshland. And by the time the 1900s started coming around the hurricane, it ended up being a catch-all for bodies. So we have some people who have actually come to visit here, and they say they keep seeing Victorian-style people walking around. As it moved on, you ended up into this island was also used for a quarantine station. Yellow fever, they had 9 bouts going up and down the coast. And the comment was, if you stayed in Galveston during one of their bouts of yellow fever, you would die like sheep. So the quarantine stations had very much like they did during COVID, where they would go out in their boats and check the vessels for yellow fever. If it had yellow fever, they were forced to stay out into harbor until it was cleared, which often meant most of the time the people had passed away. So it was a very difficult time, but this island was used for a lot of things, and it was built up over the years to become what it was. And it changed and evolved, but it was part of the 1900 hurricane. So there was a lot of people that floated up on the shore that they ended up having to pull out at one point in time.
Known as the Queen of the Gulf, the Grand Galvez is more than a hotel. It's a symbol of Galveston's resilience. Built in 1910, just 10 years after the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history left the island in ruins, the Galvez rose from the wreckage with a promise of elegance and renewal. Since then, it has welcomed presidents, celebrities, and generations of travelers drawn to its opulence and charm. But with lodgings this grand, some guests never check out. Footsteps echo in empty halls, lights flicker without cause, sometimes a face appears in the mirror when no one is there.
Hi, my name is Melissa Hall. I do the ghost tours here at the Grand Galvez. I've been doing these tours for going on 13 years. And I have to tell you, it's the highlight of my hospitality career. Mr. Stanley, I have to tell you, was one of the figures that came through. It was the very first ghost tour that I ever did. I had some ladies that actually, after the tour, went to our haunted bathrooms. They took a selfie in the haunted bathrooms, and let's just say they were waiting on me the next morning at my desk at 9 a.m. They said, Melissa, we've already been back down there. They said the only way that he would be there is if he was standing in front of us. And what they had a selfie, and right in the middle of this selfie, because it caught 2 mirrors, there was a African-American gentleman, bigger in Dallas. They said, we've already been back down there. Like I said, the only way that he would be there is if he was standing right in front of us. And I looked at the photo and I said, no ma'am. I said, do you see this pillar right here? He was actually standing right next to them, looking at them in the mirror in front of them. So he is one of our long-term guests. I have many photos of him. I actually have his obituary. He worked here at the hotel from 1964 to 1976. So where our Walmart stands prior to the 1900 storm was home to St. Mary's Orphan Asylum. It was ran by the Sisters of Charity Catholic Orphanage. There was a total of 10 nuns and a total of 93 children. Most of these children actually become orphaned there because of the yellow fever epidemic here in Galveston. So Sister Catherine, the head nun, had already made the decision that when the storm surge came through, that they were going to take refuge in the newest of the two dorms, and that was the girls' dorm. So when that storm surge did come through, that's when she made the decision that her and the other nuns were going to take clothesline, tie it around each of their waist, and tie the children to them. Unfortunately, what she thought was going to help them survive is actually what helped them meet their demise. The ropes became tangled in the underbrush. They were pulled under. Now, out of all the 93 children and the 10 nuns, there were only 3 teenage boys that survived. It is said that either they were left loose to help the children or that they argued with the nuns and said, "You will not be tying us up." But they were actually found the next day holding on to debris. So that is where the story of Sister Catherine comes. A lot of people think that we were built on top of an orphanage. That is not true. The closest orphanage to where we stand today is where the Brown Museum sits. It was actually the Galveston Orphans Home for 99 years, up until 1986 to be exact. So, we do have a resident nun here. Let's just say that she does like to make her rounds in the hotel during hurricane season. Last year, we had 2 employees that actually spotted her. One of them was heading to the bell closet down by the spa in our haunted bathrooms. Our bellman took the bell closet. He made a little turn right there, and he said he came face to face with a nun. He said, "Melissa, I never moved that bell cart so fast in my life." The other was a bar back that we had, same end of the hotel, probably about 15 feet away from that exact spot. He was getting ice in one of our banquet kitchens, and as he went to turn out the light, he turned around just a little bit, and he said the nun was about 5 feet away from him. Now, one thing about the nun, when I'm talking about a nun, I'm not talking about Sally Field as in a cute nun, as in the flying nun. Both of these gentlemen, when I asked each one, "What does she look like to you?" their same response was, "Have you ever seen The Conjuring?" So that kind of, I'm good not seeing the nun.
The Grand Galvez has earned its haunted reputation. Guests report elevators stopping on floors with no passengers, the brush of unseen hands, and the distant laughter of phantom children in the spa. Spectral visitors have been sighted in rooms, corridors, and common spaces throughout the hotel. The Grand Galvez is more than a luxury escape. It's a place where history breathes and sometimes whispers.
So here at the Grand Galvez, we do have a little one, well, lots of little ones in white, and I refer to those as little ones from the 1900 storm. We have lots and lots of those here. But one that stands out is a little girl dressed in white that played with the red ball. Now, this little girl was seen pre and post Hurricane Ike during renovation of the spa, during the opening of the spa. You know, a lot of the construction workers as well as spa attendants would report seeing her in her little ball. I recently had a guest that stayed with us, and doing what I do, I have a few little friends. One of these little friends, his name is Bobby. He's a young one and lost his life in the 1900 storm, and he does follow me around here at the hotel. So I was actually told by a medium that Bobby woke her up in the middle of the night. Once she got presentable, he took her by the hand and guided her down to the lower level of the hotel. There, this little girl in white ran up to her and just gave her the biggest bear hug that she could give. And the medium looked down at her and she said, "Sweetie, are you lost?" The little girl said, "Yes." She said, "Did you get lost in the storm?" "Yes." "Are you looking for Mommy and Daddy?" "Yes." She said, "Sweetie," she says, "all you have to do is go towards the light." So her name was Abigail Schuler. She was the youngest of 5 children. The rest of her family lost their lives in the 1900 storm. Abigail was the little one here in white with the red ball. She is now with her family in heaven, but I have been told that she visits. So Our most famous ghost that we have here at the Grand Galvez is going to be Audra, our lovelorn bride. Audra was in her mid-20s. She was engaged to a mariner who would sail in and out of the port of Galveston. Room 501 is the room that she would stay in. Full ocean view, 2 windows, you couldn't beat the view. So when it was time for his ship to come back in, she would leave room 501, take the elevator up to the 7th floor, then climb the narrow steps to the west turret. And there, sheltered from the wind, the rain, and the weather, she would keep an eye out for her fiancé's ship. Where word got back to her that there was a mighty storm at sea, that the ship went down, and all hands on deck were lost. So in her despair, she took that elevator up that one last time. This time she carried a rope with her, and she ended up hanging herself. Now the saddest part of the story is her fiancé, very much alive, showed back up to the Grand Galvez just a few short days later, looking for his bride-to-be, who unfortunately is no longer in the land of the living, but now one of our long-term, non-paying guests. We have many. She is just the most well-known. So here at the Galvez, we have a painting of our namesake and also Galveston's namesake. It's Bernardo de Galvez. Bernardo de Galvez fought in the American Revolutionary War. He won every battle that him and his Spanish forces fought up and down the Great Mississippi. He was actually promoted to colonel at the young age of 30, succeeded his father as Viceroy to Spain, which is now Mexico, and actually passed away at the ripe old age of 40. Back then, that was like living to 100. But even though the Bernardo is the namesake of our beautiful hotel, our lovely island, ironically, he never visited Galveston. He did, however, send the map maker Jose Dievia in 1785 to map out the Texas Gulf Coast. It was actually Dievia who stumbled across Galveston Bay and promptly named it Bahia de Galveston. So that's where we get the beautiful name of our hotel, our lovely island, and what we now know to be the largest bay in Texas. Now back to the painting of Bernardo. It is said that it is a haunted painting. It has actually been here at the hotel as long as the hotel has been here, since 1911. It was actually commissioned by residents of Galveston Island and placed in the hotel prior to it opening. But like I said, it is a haunted hotel. There are some tales surrounding the painting. Legend has it you must ask Bernardo's permission to take a photo. Some don't get this, or some forget about this, and what do they say? It's always easier to ask forgiveness than it is to ask permission. Some of the mediums that I've actually had on my tour, they said that is something that he takes very serious, though. He is someone in charge and should be asked whether he would like his photo taken or not. So many strange things have been captured in that painting. I have a gentleman. I call him the old man of the sea. He literally is a big hooded figure with a big beard. You could see the furrowed brows. You could see the pursed lips. Like I said, he does not look very happy at all. So a lot of people report seeing skulls in the painting. So that is actually one of the number one selfie spots in the hotel is the painting of Bernardo. Beautiful painting, beautiful stairwell. There was actually talk of building the Hotel Galvez prior to the 1900 storm. Unfortunately, that was put on hold due to, like I said, the 1900 storm. So the Galvez was actually built as a symbol of recovery. We opened our doors June 10th at 6 p.m. in 1911 as a symbol of recovery following that devastating storm. Now, most of our spirits that we have here, I believe, come from that storm. We had a medium who actually visited the hotel one time, and she asked the children, she says, well, how did you get here? And this little boy very proudly came up saying, it was me, it was me, it was me. He said, we walked and we walked and we walked, and then we found our castle. And I do believe that a lot of the little ones that we have, and they look at this as their castle. I mean, the hallways are their playgrounds, the ballrooms are their playgrounds, we're their babysitters. They're having a good time. They're not running around crying and boo-hooing, rattling chains. They're running around, they're playing, they're having a good time. We have a little bit of everything. We have soldiers from every era. Like I said, we have children. You name it, we've got it. We've got animals. We have a large yellow dog that likes to hang around 521 all the way up to around 500. We have a small dog on the 3rd floor that will jump on the bed with you. And we also have a cat that likes to hang out in the music hall. So we have a little bit of everything. Like I said, here at the Galvez, we do not discriminate with our ghost. So recently, we've had an uptick in photos involving Indians, Native Americans. So the Native Americans that we had here in Galveston were the Karankawa. The Karankawa were known to be between 6'3" and 6'5", both men and women. Like I said, we have captured 2 photos lately. I've actually had other guests that have mentioned seeing these Indians on property, but I kind of feel like they come along the same way, the same lines that our soldiers, our children do. They actually find themselves here. They're not actually in the hotel per se because of the hotel, but it's in the land. And Native Americans and the Karankawas were part of Galveston. So, and I think that is one that has been untouched for a long time here, and suddenly they seem to be making an appearance.
Galveston is a city built on layers, brick and bone, wealth and water, memory and myth. Its beauty is undeniable, but beneath the surface, something endures. Some call it energy. Others say it's the past refusing to stay silent. In a city alive with movement and noise, stories still linger in the shops of an old building, the quiet rooms of a mansion, the cold steel of a warship, and the echoing halls of a grand hotel. Maybe these places remember for us. Maybe the voices we hear are echoes of lives once lived and moments never laid to rest. And maybe, just maybe, the dead still have something to say.